Well, anyways, I learned that I was on Interpol's most wanted list while eating milkbrötchen on the first-class deck of a ferry on the Rhine, somewhere between Heidelberg and Karlsruhe. Germany has laws on the books to protect whistleblowers in the financial sector. The Finanzdienstleistungsaufsichtsgesetz, or FINDAG, declares the federal office does not disclose the identity of a person who has filed a report without first obtaining the express consent of that person. Furthermore, the federal agency does not disclose the identity of a person who is the subject of a report. Well, apparently, the Oberlandesgericht, the high state court, hasn't read subsection 3 of the FINDAG, because after I handed over the leaked documents to Die Zeit and to The Guardian, they immediately filed charges and issued a warrant for my arrest. Those guys sure know how to ruin a perfectly good milkbrötchen. I joined Deutsche Bank in 2002 after 7 years with Chase in New York. Deutsche was in the midst of a poaching spree, lapping up bankers at New York firms like a cat with a bowl of crack-laced milk. Deutsche Bank was intent on playing with the big boys, so they hired the big boys' biggest boys. I had experience in New York real estate, having worked on a number of high-value projects in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Not to toot my own horn, but Jay-Z's team, they play basketball in an arena that wouldn't exist had it not been for a few well-played cards up my sleeve. Suffice it to say that designating the arena as publicly owned did wonders for the tax burden.
Staff at Deutsche Bank flagged transactions tied to entities controlled by Donald Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner, saying they should be reported to a federal watchdog for financial crimes. That's according to a report in the New York Times on Sunday, who cited 5 current or former employees at the German-based bank. The sources told the Times the bank rejected the advice from their own anti-money laundering specialists, and that those reports were never filed with the government. The transactions had reportedly set off alerts in a computer system designed to detect illegal activity, some of which involves Trump's now-defunct foundation. The report said the nature of the transactions was not clear, but that some involved money moving back and forth with overseas entities. Compliance staff had prepared reports on some of the transactions in question that they believe should have been sent to a unit of the Treasury Department that polices financial crimes, according to the report. Staff members who spoke to the Times said they saw the decision not to report those transactions as part of a pattern of bank executives protecting relationships with lucrative clients. A Deutsche Bank spokesperson was quoted in the report saying the bank's investigators were not prevented from escalating suspicious transactions. A Trump Organization spokesperson told the Times the story was, quote, absolute nonsense, and the Kushner Organization called the allegations made up and totally false.
2003, we sold hundreds of millions of dollars in bonds to institutional investors on behalf of Trump hotels and casino resorts. And just 1 year later, Trump defaulted on those same bonds. Our clients took a bath. After that, the division of the bank that sold the bonds cut all ties with the Trump organization. But right around the same time, Trump approached another department of the bank, the commercial real estate division where I work. He was looking for a $500 million loan to build the Trump Tower in Chicago. I'll be honest, we were in no hurry to make the loan. There had been some disagreement about Trump's net worth. You see, for the loans, Trump reported his net worth at $3 billion with a B. But a New York Times journalist named Timothy O'Brien did some digging and reported that Trump's actual net worth was $788 million with an M. Still nothing to sneeze at, but when somebody lies on a loan application, there's usually a reason. Let's just say that a few of us were concerned, so we flag it for review. But then, a couple of days later, I get a direct email, nobody CC'd, just me, from Rosemary Vrabalik, one of Deutsche's managing directors. She and Trump were introduced by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and since then, Rosemary has become something like Trump's personal banker. From what I'm told, she had a pretty good seat at Trump's inauguration. So Rosemary tells me to go ahead and approve the loan. This brought the total value of loans made by Deutsche Bank to Donald Trump to $2 billion. That's more than the nominal GDP of the entire country of Belize. So the loan went through, and now there it sits on the banks of the Chicago River. Trump's name in 20-foot-tall letters, sticking his tongue out at the whole city of Chicago.
At Mike Stacy. I never went bankrupt. At CJ O'Leary. I never went bankrupt. At Dylan. Dopey. I never filed for bankruptcy.
krautrock, pop music characterized by repetition, machinic rhythms, and the pioneering employment of electronics.
Bargeld ist neue Liebe. Bargeld ist neue Liebe. Bargeld ist neue Liebe. Bargeld ist neue Liebe. It's 1988.
The Baader-Meinhof gang were members of the first generation of Germans to achieve political consciousness after the war. They were born into a world that should have been different. Other Germans of their generation started bands or became poets or artists, like Richter. Some, like Herrhausen, just 4 years older than Ulrike Meinhof, took jobs and joined bourgeois society. We can question the RAF's tactics. Maybe a song or a painting is stronger than a bomb. But when the state can use violence whenever and however it wants, and the people just have to absorb that violence and submit to the so-called democratic process,
By 2008, Trump Tower in Chicago wasn't working out so well. They were having a devil of a time selling condo units, and the loan from Deutsche Bank was coming due in November. But on September 15th, Lehman Brothers went belly up and everything changed. Not only did Trump claim that the financial crisis was an act of God that should let him out of his debt, but he sued Deutsche Bank for $3 billion in damages, claiming that the bank, the same bank that had loaned him the GDP of Belize, was responsible for the crisis. Needless to say, the investment banking division cut ties with Trump. 2010 was the year that Jared Kushner introduced Trump to Rosemary Verbalic. And despite the fact that Deutsche's investment bankers had washed their hands of Trump, Rosemary worked her magic, securing a $100 million loan for the Doral Golf Resort in Florida and another $48 million, get this, for the same Chicago tower that Trump had defaulted on and sued the bank over. Trump said he would use the second loan to repay what he owed on the first one. I mean, this is nuts. Even the New York Times thought so. Here's what they wrote. Even by Wall Street standards, borrowing money from one part of a bank to pay off a loan from another was an extraordinary act of financial chutzpah. And for my non-Jewish, non-New York friends, let me do a little impromptu translating for you. By chutzpah, they mean, this guy's got some major cojones. But look, I was on the inside, and I could see what was going on, piece by dirty piece. This was a classic case of power making money and money making power. So I did what anybody with a conscience would have done. I blew the whistle. And for that, I'm rewarded with an international arrest warrant. No Ecuadorian embassy for me. I sleep in a different bed every night, and I know that soon I'm going to run out of beds. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who would still be just a two-bit player in New York real estate if it hadn't been for Deutsche Bank's demonic love of Bargeld, is sleeping in the White House.